Hey, fellow patriots, I'm Bree.
And I'm Blaze. Some call me Pa. It has been said that we have 4 boxes to keep ourselves free. These are the soapbox, the ballot box, the jury box, and the ammo box.
And we are the 4th box. We are here to arm you with enough information, resources, and skills to take back your freedom, increase your self-sufficiency, and inspire you to join in the fight against tyranny.
Thomas Jefferson said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." Thank you for joining us and for joining in this fight.
Welcome back to the 4th box. Okay, everybody, welcome back to another week at the 4th box. It is our 77th episode. I think you had a slip of the tongue last week. You said it was our 77th episode, but we finally made it there. So we are excited to be joined by another guest this evening, which I think is going to be a very appropriate one. But before we go ahead and introduce him, Pops, I'll defer to you for quote and toast.
Yeah, great. As Bree alluded to, I also am very much looking forward to our discussion tonight. Leading up to that, I want to welcome all of our listeners from around the country. Greetings from our 4th box studio, coming to you tucked away safely in our virtual Buckman Tavern. And I'm very happy tonight to be alongside of Bree. Usually we have a few hundred miles between us. I think this is our 3rd, maybe 4th show that we actually got to do together. So very happy to have you alongside tonight for the ride.
There were some technical issues because of it, but we've sorted through them.
We have sorted through them. And tonight, again, I am offering up a toast. Back last week, we celebrated probably an overlooked historical event, which was the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill. And, you know, the Brits ended up winning that battle, but I think it was an inspirational piece of the American Revolution that put the fighting spirit into those brave men and women that took up arms against the homeland in an effort to gain freedom and independence for themselves. So I'm toasting that event tonight, the anniversary, 250th anniversary last week of the Battle of Bunker Hill. And then
Cheers.
For my quote tonight, when a man is denied the right to live the life he believes in, he has no choice but to become an outlaw. And that was from Nelson Mandela. And we find that particular quote very near and dear to our hearts. So with nothing further from me, Bree, I'm ready to turn it over to our guest tonight and see where the conversation leads.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'll do my kind of generic intro and then we'll let him take it away. So today's guest is a voice of clarity in a culture clouded by confusion. Adam B. Coleman is the author of Black Victim to Black Victor, where he dismantles popular narratives around race and victimhood while offering a path toward self-empowerment. He's also the creator of the Substack Speaking Wrong at the Right Time, where he delivers thoughtful commentary on some of the most controversial issues of our day. And his latest book, The Children We Leave Behind, looks at how modern society is failing the next generation. Adam has a lot of ideas that really resonate with us at the 4th box, and we hope to dive into just some of them tonight. Lastly, Adam, I know you recently spoke on fatherhood out at Freedom Fest, so it feels like an especially appropriate fit for you to join us on the show that I co-host with my father. So with that, welcome to the 4th box.
Thank you for having me.
So let's dive right into it. I kind of did my little intro for you, but go ahead and go into that further. Tell us a little bit more about who you are and how you got started in all of this.
Well, the short answer is purely by accident.
Okay.
I am a IT guy by trade. Went to tech school, working in the IT field, starting from older phone tech support, all the way to becoming an IT manager for a small business. And that's where my career ultimately led to when 2020 came around and decided to write a book after realizing I'm not the one that's going crazy.
Yeah.
Other people were losing their minds. And so, I attempted to write a book. It took me somewhere around 8-9 months to finish it, start to finish. and self-published it. Just wanted to see if anybody wanted to hear what I had to say. I didn't really have any expectations. I still don't. Um, and I think it's the best way to move forward, to not expect so much. And when things happen, you're even more grateful and surprised when they do. Um, and yes, so basically from that, just one opportunity led into another, led into another. Meeting people, connecting with people, networking with people, um, and especially when I got on Twitter, that's when like the entire world opened up to me. Um, and I tell people all the time, like 90% of the opportunities that I got um, are either originated from or stemmed from Twitter, um, including professional opportunities like writing for Newsweek, which led to writing for the New York Post and my long relationship with them.
Yeah. So what a big jump. I mean, to your point, you obviously went into it with no expectations, and self-publishing, like that had to be somewhat arduous, especially because it doesn't sound like you had experience doing that type of thing before.
Yeah.
How did you kind of navigate that process, and what was it like to then jump into the world of like bigger names in news?
Well, the good thing about writing the book the way that I did backwards was that I had no pressure. I wrote what I wanted to write. Um, and throughout that period, we're dealing with, you hear the horror stories of people getting canceled and losing their jobs because they said the wrong thing and blah, blah, blah. My, she's my wife now, but we were dating at the time and she was supporting me, like, doing this. I told her, I was like, I could lose my job, you know, and I have to be fine with that. Said, whatever you want to do, I support it. Um, Turns out it was the opposite. The owner of the company bought 5 copies of the book, and you know,
Oh,
and
that's
got way
awesome.
more. Yeah, yeah. But I just didn't tell anybody. I didn't even tell my mother. I had basically like 3 or 4 people outside of my wife who knew about me writing the book. I didn't want to tell a bunch of people. I just wanted to do it. I wanted to do it for myself, and I wanted to do it for my son, which is why I dedicated the book to him. Um, So, yeah, that process, as far as writing goes, was a learning process. The reason it took me as long as it did, which a lot of people say that was actually pretty good amount of time, pretty short, but I I was writing and I was more frustrated in the beginning of the writing process because of everything that was going on. But as I went on, my real voice, which is more empathetic, started coming through, and my writing style was improving. So I had to go back and rewrite what I written in the very beginning over. So that took some time
Sure.
to go through that process. But basically, my entire writing career at this point has been about um, practice, growth, and finding your writing voice. But I just started writing like how I talk to people. And working in tech support, you talk to all different types of people. And if you care about your job, you learn how to tailor your message or convince people to do things that so you're on the same page. You use terminology that is understandable. So you do all these things, and I care about communicating with people, not trying to use big words to make myself seem smart. I'm trying to convey a message. I'm trying to work with people. I want them to understand what I am saying. So I just tried to use that same approach on top of I had a friend who told me to her words were women read books too.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
she said, you need to be a little bit more emotional. And that that one statement, that one tip from a friend has now become like my calling card of being vulnerable and being emotional, being open to expressing myself, um, and not just being so robotic. You know, you
Mm,
know, a plus, 1 plus 1 is 2, and just being
right.
very analytical. I think that's the word. Being very analytical, non-emotional. And
Sure.
so the way that I try to write, I do a lot of storytelling because storytelling is very human, very emotional. So that's that one statement from one friend in critique in the very early process um, has been like the calling card for my writing career.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I do want to get into your newer book at
Yep.
one point, but we'll start with Black victim to Black victor. Tell us a little bit about that story and, putting your own story into it and kind of challenging the narratives that were and are so common today.
Yeah. Because it was my first book and my first like real writing attempt, like that was like structured. Um, the only thing I was starting with was like, let me write a book about race. Like that was just like the first thing that came to mind. But what it turned into was like trying to answer the question of the moment: what's the biggest issue facing Black Americans? Um, and what we were being told over and over and over is that it was racism. And for me, it was family separation. That's the biggest issue facing Black Americans. But throughout the book, I'm pointing that this is the biggest issue facing all Americans.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of weaving in and out of talking about Black Americans specifically and being very general. So if I'm talking about childhood development, I'm talking about it in very general because children are children. Um, and I did that purposefully because I wanted to have people understand that we have more in common than we do different, and that the hyper focus on the Black plight, so to speak, loses uh, hyper focusing on that often pulls us apart than more so than brings us together. Um, but I am talking about certain things that are race specific so people can understand each other. I am giving a social critique. I am talking about cultural elements that exist within it. But there are times that these things can kind of cross over to different cultures. One of my good friends now, he was like one of the first people to reach out to me after reading the book. Um, he lives out in the UK, but he was saying, his family is immigrant to the United Kingdom. He was saying, I see this element within my own uh, culture.
Yeah.
And, so there are a lot of human elements to it. It's a very human book in many ways. And I've had people say, like, you go in thinking you're going to read one thing, and you get something completely different. Like I'm talking about morality. Um, I'm painting a picture about being under government control with fictional characters. Um, so all of these different things I was kind of experimenting at the time to convey a message that was relatively clear. So yeah, I think that's like the long form of what the Black victor is.
Yeah.
Yeah, Adam, if I could jump in for a second, a couple of points you made that are very, very interesting to me. One
Mhm.
of the early points you made, suggesting that you were determining for yourself that you weren't crazy, that the world may have been going crazy outside of your own personal space. Was that related to the COVID event? Am I reading that correctly?
So it was both.
Okay,
The COVID event had me asking questions, um, and I saw a lot of irrational responses to people.
absolutely. Mhm.
Um, I remember asking a friend, someone, I would say they're rather progressive, and we're no longer friends now. But I remember asking them, you know, have you ever heard of this? Was it 6 feet apart? Like I've never
Yeah.
heard of that.
Yeah.
I've I've been alive for a long time, never heard of that. Like, you hear different practices, cover your mouth, sneeze, like you hear all these different things. I've never heard 6 feet. And they got very angry and called me like, don't be ignorant. And I was like,
Right.
the hell is that all about? Like I'm
Mhm.
asking you a question because I've never heard this before. And now everyone's saying this, like, duh, everyone knows this. So
Yeah.
excuse me for questioning where this came from. What does this mean? So I always like when I tell that story, I always like to feel vindicated because I've been very fortunate enough to talk to Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, um, and Martin. Shoot, I'm drawing a blank on his last name. Um, he was also part of the Great Barrington Declaration. Martin Koldorf. Um, I got to sit down with both of them for breaking bread and actually talk to them about this very thing. But specifically, Dr. J was like, yeah, that was bullshit. Like
Yeah.
if you go into a room and you cough, the particles are in the air. Like, it doesn't matter if you're 6 feet. Like, you leave and someone else comes in and they breathe in that air that was the particles in the air. That's how it spreads. So the
Yeah.
6 feet makes no sense. It's pointless.
Yeah.
Hey, as long
I
as
was like,
we're
"Thank
poking
you."
fun, as long as we're poking fun at some of that, how about if you walk into the restaurant, you had to have your mask on until you sat down, and then you could take it off. Yeah, a lot of this
Right.
stuff was really humorous, and some of us found it humorous at the point that it was going on. But I guess there were others who really believed, I guess, that their life was being spared by these notions that were put in place. But another point I was really interested in, also, Adam, you had mentioned government control, which really piqued our interest. One of the things that we strive here at the Fourth Box to try to bring to people's attention is the independency and the personal liberties that we have lost, and oftentimes it's sold to us as necessary for our security and safety, and we give up these liberties and give up these liberties. But I was curious about that, about your comment related to government control, and if that tied in specifically, was the COVID event what opened your eyes to that? Is this something you had been thinking about prior to that, and did anything in your background lead up to these things that ultimately ended up with your book?
Yeah. So I would say a year prior to actually sitting down and writing the book, I want to say it was about a year prior, I had met, it sounds like it's coming out of nowhere, but it goes somewhere. I was traveling in Europe. I was in Madrid, and I came across this guy at a pub. So I'm a soccer fan. I like watching, especially English Premier League. I was watching Chelsea play. Chelsea had finished. They scored a last-minute goal to tie it up against Manchester United. I still remember the game.
Mhm.
Then it was like torrential downpour. All of a sudden, I had no umbrella or anything, so I just stayed and watched the next game. And that's when I met him. He's a Manchester City fan. They were playing. Um, so we were just chatting it up, and my thing was when I would travel abroad, if I felt like good with someone, I was like, "Hey, let's just exchange information." And we just talked to each other, and we just kept communicating. He was so even though I was in Madrid, he lived there, but he's actually from Manchester. Um, and he had moved to Madrid years ago with his I guess fiance now. I can't remember the status they're at now. But they have 2 children now. Before, at that point, they didn't have any kids. But I met both of them at the time. And yeah, when I got back home, we were talking football and stuff like that, and uh, Brexit had came up in conversation, and so I was like, "Huh, what do you think of this Brexit thing?" And he's like, "I'm for it." I was like, "Okay." I thought like Brexit is for these racist British people who don't like foreigners, right? That's what I was being told. So I had good faith in him, so I asked him why. Why was he for it? And he said the United States would never allow an outside governing body to tell it what to do. And I said, that makes a whole lot of sense.
Mhm.
We wouldn't.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what he was talking about. He was ultimately talking about sovereignty,
Mm.
um, allowing for his country to control itself, and not letting it dictate how often they can fish, and how
Mhm.
many illegal immigrants you have to let in your borders, and any the thing that the bureaucracy wants, but that goes against the interests of the people within that particular country. Um, so from that point, he really opened me up to like hear more of his thoughts, but also hearing from other people, and that's when he and I started going on like this like ebook binge. I'm sorry, audiobook binge. We were just listening to audiobooks, um and just taking all types of stuff. And I was just getting curious, and I was just like, let me listen to this, let me listen to that. And that was around that time that I listened to a book called Resistance at Any Cost, which was about Trump, but it was about the lies about Trump. And so that's when I found out about the good people on both sides lie, that book. And I remember hearing that. I was like, oh shit, let me. I was like, let me go on the internet and find this, and I think PragerU had the full context, and I was like, if they will lie to me about this over and over and over for years, what else would they lie to me about? And so from that point, that was like what kind of cracked open, not necessarily just for like Trump, because I have questions about Trump. I voted
Mhm.
for him this past election, but I have questions about him. There are things I
Mhm.
agree with and things I think he's silly about, but I
Of
don't think he's a
course.
monster. I
Mhm.
Yeah.
criticize him just like any other politician. Uh, but when it came to that, I realized that this default trust I was giving into the media, I couldn't have anymore. Um, I had to verify things. I had to look into things, and I had to um, think about like, why do I actually support this thing? Rather than it just being the thing because I'm a Democrat, that's just what we do. Um, how does that actually make me feel? Does that really fit my values? So I became very critical of myself and started becoming more open to different political philosophies. Um, so actually, from that point, I believe it was around that point that I started um, consuming. Yeah, it was around that point that I started consuming all different types of media. I actually didn't go to conservative media. I actually went to progressive media because I wanted to hear what the progressives had to say. Because I figured I was on the left. Let me hear what the progressives have to say. And I listened to Jimmy Dore. I tried to listen to the Young Turks, but they were uh, hard to listen to. Um, you know, Pac-Man, but he's a bit smarmy. That was like the common thing.
Mhm.
Kyle Kalinske wasn't as annoying as he is now. So I would listen to all these different people in the progressive side for months. And then I was like, all right, let me listen to the conservatives. So I started consuming Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, and all these different people, and just started thinking about what makes sense for me. Um, and so, yeah, I would say that it was probably a year prior, leading into 2020, that I really started to. I don't want to say I shifted my politics. I want to say I solidified my politics. Because there's only really one position that I truly changed on, um, and that is abortion.
Mm.
I was pro-choice. I am like radically. If you ask me if I was king for a day, what would I do? I would abolish the option. No,
Amen.
no exceptions. Um, but from a political standpoint, that's a no go. Um, but if you ask me personally, no exceptions. Life is life. Um, and I've met people. Um, I've met women who are raped and had children who think their children are blessings, and I've met a friend of mine is a product of a rape,
Mm.
and had me ask the question: is her life less valuable because of how she was conceived? And of course not. That's absurd. But
Right.
Mhm.
that's how we treat it politically.
Mhm.
Um, so that's probably like the only thing that I've like truly shifted on. The rest of the stuff that has shifted has not been because I shifted; it's because everyone else has shifted.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's such a great point. And I love that I know in the beginning you said this feels far away, but it's going somewhere. And it really did.
Yeah,
And I think that's so important that you started with that story. You're traveling, you're just a guy and you just talk to a stranger. And that's something we talk
yeah,
about on here all the time. Like sitting down and having these conversations in real life literally can shift your whole worldview. If you allow yourself to be a real human and to talk to other real humans and forget for a second that we're divided by these lines that really have been manipulated to divide us. If we just sit down and bridge that gap, which they don't want us to do, it does take a little bit of effort. If we bridge that gap, this is what ends up happening. And I think that's such an inspiring story. We always end up down these tangents where we don't really know where we're going to go. But I love that that's where that ended up because I think that's such a big part of this. I mean, obviously, it really shifted who you are and it really ended up resulting in now several books. So, yeah,
yeah.
super, super cool.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I also, Adam, interested in the way you framed that. You solidified your viewpoint of politics, and I wondered, as part of that, have you been a student of the Constitution? How do you use that at all, if at all, as an underpinning to your positions? And are you tying anything to that in the books? We're very strong and very big advocates of the Constitution and those principles that were put in place, and I think they still hold true today if we were living by them. And there are mechanisms within that framework to change it, most of which we never use. We just do it by executive order, which we're really not in favor of. I just wondered if you have a background in that area. Do you allow those things to influence your thinking?
So I am pro-Constitution. So I'll just say that first. Um, when I look at stuff, like if someone says, "Hey, here's a new idea that I want to advocate for that the government should do," what I think about is, does it make sense and is it moral? And when I say is it moral, I'm coming from a Christian perspective. Is this a moral stance? And does this make sense? Um, and so that's generally how I try to see it. Like, is does this thing violate our constitution in some sort of way? Does it violate our sovereignty as a nation? So I would say, like, I'll give an example. I voted for Trump this past election, and I would say probably my number one issue was immigration.
Mhm.
And I say that as, my father was an immigrant to this country. I wouldn't be here without my, father being in this country. But my father came here legally.
Right.
Right.
And there is something about that. And there is this trickery that's happening within the media to lose that distinction between someone who comes here legally and someone who does not. And they like to switch stuff from illegal to undocumented, as if, oh, it's just a paperwork issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Like, no, it's a process issue. Like the process of them getting here was illegal.
Right.
It's not the fact that they are undocumented. As if, oh, we just have to print out a couple more pages and they're good to go. No, they violated the law. Every country has immigration laws. And I've made this point before. Even North Korea deports people.
Right.
Like,
Yep.
everyone deports people because it makes sense, right? And it is not an immoral thing to deport people, especially when there are laws around how you come to a particular nation. If I was to go to a country, if I was to go to Germany, I said, I love Germany. I got a 90-day travel visa, a Schengen visa, and I've been here for 95 days. I cannot be shocked when the police show up to arrest me and deport me, right? I just can't be shocked.
Yeah.
Like, because there are rules. Every country has it. And it is supposed to be, what I want to say is like colorblind when it comes to it. Everyone can get deported, no matter where you come from, because as long as you follow the process, you're good to go. If you don't follow the process, you get deported. And the way I see it is, when you don't do that, then that's when people suffer. They suffer economically, they suffer physically. And the part of illegal immigration that people don't often talk about is the people who are coming here, and not everyone crosses the border and becomes, some construction guy and everything is hunky dory. Many of them are being kidnapped in the process of coming here. Women are being raped and sold into sex slavery. Children are being taken and sold into sex slavery. Children are being used as pawns for other people to cross into the border. So when they said we don't know who the parents are for these kids. They had a bunch of kids at the border. I think it was in Trump's first term when they were making a big deal about that. The kids in cages and all that stuff. Well, that's because the cartel is using children and they don't know. Like, no one knows where these kids came from. That's the tragedy of this whole thing. So when you let it get out of control, evil people will exploit a good thing. And immigration in general is a good thing. But when you don't value our nation, and I think that's the thing I realized in the past 6 months, especially, is that there are certain people within our government that do not value the United States, and you can tell by their behavior. Because when they sell America short as anyone can come here and just why are you even bothering with all this stuff? Yeah, just come here. There's plenty of space. As if space is the issue.
Yeah.
It's not a space issue, right? And yes, you can go into middle America and there's tons of space, but there is no society there. Right? This is not a space issue. This is about sovereignty. And these people are not moving to remote areas in North Dakota. Like they're coming to very specific areas. They are effectively replacing people in certain areas. They're replacing people in their work environment. Like, so they're harming people economically. They're harming the American sovereignty. When you go unchecked, like in the Biden administration, you don't know who's here. Everyone keeps talking about, the Iranians. It's like, well, they might have sleeper cells here. I wonder how that would even be possible.
Right.
Like, so there are a whole bunch of things that just that one issue of immigration, unchecked immigration, that leads to human suffering for the people who are trying to come here illegally, right? Being sold a false bill of goods. When they come here, now they're part of the underbelly of society, right? Where they can make some money and they can send some money back home, but they'll never become an American citizen. And everyone toys with them and they become this political pawn, especially from Democrats. But them being here allows for Democrats in certain places, especially California, to remain in power because census doesn't care if you're legal or illegal. You're a body.
Yeah.
And guess what? That goes towards their count. And that's all they care about. They do not actually care about making these people citizens. What they do care about is cheap labor, though.
Yeah.
Right? So now you count on the census, and you give me electoral power. And my buddies who donate to my campaign, you're now cheap labor for agriculture. You're now cheap labor for these warehouses. I live in New Jersey. I believe New Jersey has the fifth most Hispanic people, the fifth highest Hispanic population in the country. I believe it's either fifth or sixth, something like that. For a small state, down the street, warehouse, like all across New Jersey, in a small state, they've started calling New Jersey the warehouse state. There are warehouses everywhere, and I've been inside these warehouses. It's illegals. I worked for a company, consulted for a company, and been inside these places. They all speak Spanish as their first language, and they barely speak any English. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. They don't drive a car. Right? Like they're living in the underbelly of society. They live in specific areas. There's a van that comes and picks them up and brings them to these locations. They get paid minimum wage. Right? All of this is happening within the state of New Jersey and within other states. And they want to sell us that Americans won't do these jobs, which is it's an absolute lie. Because now that there is starting to be enforcement, you're starting to hear about people. I can't remember what state it was in. I think it was Oklahoma. It was like the largest ICE raid in Oklahoma state history of a factory. All of a sudden, now there's job ads, and all these Americans want to work at this factory.
Yeah, imagine.
Oh, imagine that. So,
yeah,
as a long answer, to me, having proper immigration laws and enforcing those laws mean nothing unless you enforce them. Actually enforcing immigration laws is for the betterment of our country and actually for the betterment of the world. If people want to come here the legal means, if we want to discuss how many and how they do it, that's fine. I have no problem with that. But to create a false path for people who maybe are looking for an economic opportunity, who maybe are looking for safety, to have them trench their way through a cartel-ridden country like Mexico to potentially be raped and kidnapped, to me seems highly immoral. When you know that the outcome is what we can, have our crops done a little bit cheaper, like, does that seem like a fair trade-off? Does that seem godly at all? So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Well, I think that's such an interesting answer. I know that you are starting this question with like the constitutional mindset. But obviously that's not the only document that we reference a lot on the show. The Bible is the other one, right? So like there's two things that have to take into consideration. And obviously the whole point of the Constitution is to protect our rights given to us by God, not by any man, not by anyone sitting in Washington, D.C. or any other, state capital office, by God.
Right.
And all of those things can be researched, if you like to call it that, in the Bible, which is where obviously a lot of your ideas are coming from here. And I think it's interesting that you brought that up in that way, because that's a lot of times the argument for immigration. It's like, you can't call yourself a Christian and then at the same time call people illegal. But I'm pretty sure you just answered all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a process thing. It's not that this listen, if I stole a car, I get convicted, I come out, and someone calls me a felon, that is a status that I've earned.
Right.
Right. So like if you come into a country under your own means and you did it in a non-legal way, I'm sorry, but I don't care that you don't like that we called you illegal.
Exactly.
Like you immigrated to this country illegally. I don't know other which way that this is supposed to, like, why are we mincing words? You did what you did. And like the one last thing I'll say is this, well, actually it's a misdemeanor.
Right.
Here's what they leave out. See, when it's a misdemeanor, that means that it is a crime, and it is a crime that they can punish you by imprisoning you in this country. But that is absent of actual immigration law. You don't have to commit a felony to be deported.
Right.
That's the part that they leave out. So these are two separate things. There's immigration law and criminal law, right? Immigration law, if you violate immigration law, yes, it is illegal to do this, and so you can be deported. That's the punishment for violating immigration law, is to be deported.
Yeah.
But there's criminal law, right? And yes, it falls under a misdemeanor, but a misdemeanor is still a crime. You still committed an offense, right? But that's if they choose to imprison you. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to be like, we're not going to imprison this guy. We're just going to send him back to where he came from. Why are we going to waste our tax dollars imprisoning this guy? He came here illegally. He gone. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Right. So there's, once again, this is media trickery where they want to say something to minimize the actual harm that is happening for people who are coming here illegally, who are getting caught up in a system where the cartels and big business profit from them, and they get hurt, and also the American citizen gets hurt economically, and even in many ways safety-wise, they're the ones getting hurt. When they do allow the criminals who come in, the gangs that come, the Venezuelan gangs that come here, and actually hurt Americans because they're not supposed to be here,
Right.
and no one's doing anything about it.
Yeah, for sure.
A couple of the remarks, Adam, that you made that I think just really resonate with us and align so much with our thinking. And one of them was early on when you mentioned that there are people that are obviously intent on harming this country, and many of them sit in office, and that is very visible by allowing this to go on, allowing thugs and drugs to stream into this country, into our communities, disrupting families, disrupting workplaces, and all of those things. And really, I think what you were framing in that remark was that it's being done to alter voting demographics. This is why this stuff is happening, and it should not be, as you go back to the very basis of the law, constitutionally, the federal government has authority over maintaining a uniform code of naturalization, i.e. immigration, and how that is handled. And if we just simply brush that off the table because we want to flood various districts to alter voting demographics, somebody is doing something illegally. It doesn't matter how they twist the words in the media. This is a crime in and of itself, letting crime go by without being punished and without being dealt with according to the law as it is written.
Yes, 100%.
So I know, I think we were hoping to get to, Adam, how the family is such a key piece to being successful in our community, being successful in our counties, in our states, and ultimately in our country. And I think, if I'm correct, I think you have a lot of insights into how important this is and what we should be doing as a country to improve family conditions throughout. And I know you're especially aware of these things and how it is impacting various communities throughout the country.
Yeah, it's a very personal um, situation for me growing up without my father, seeing
Mhm.
how it impacted me, seeing how it's impacted others who are in similar circumstances. That it's nothing new and it's alarming, but everyone pretends to not see what is happening.
Mhm.
Um, and the reason why is because, well, the adults get to do the thing that they want to do. Um, and that's a big thing within this book is talking about parental selfishness. Um,
Amen.
when it comes to raising children, but just in general, if you love someone, you'll sacrifice for them. That's the
Mhm.
difference. That's why you can't buy someone's love, right? It has to be a voluntary act of sacrifice. Um, and that's why I use the example of Jesus Christ. It was his sacrifice of God's Son, Jesus Christ, for us. That's the greatest sign of love, to sacrifice your life for someone else. And he sacrificed his life to save the world. Um, so the act of sacrificing for our children in many ways is just like it's a small portion of what is necessary for children to succeed. It's a way to signify how much we care about our kids.
Mhm.
Um, and that it is not about you anymore. It's about them. For children, they're innocent. They don't know what they don't know, and they need a guiding light, and you're supposed to be that.
Mhm.
But if the guiding light is always leading them to places that benefits the adults and not kids themselves, then how are the kids ever going to be advocated for?
Mhm.
That's ultimately the biggest issue that I'm noticing is that we rationalize the bad behavior of adults
Mhm.
because the adults want to live a particular way. And if they're happy, then their kids will be happy. That's what we like to say to ourselves. But that's not how kids operate. Most children, by default, are people pleasers, especially when it comes to their parents.
Mhm.
They're incredibly forgiving of their parents. Um, and I'm sorry, but a 5-year-old is not going to likely is not going to challenge mommy or daddy about their parental decision because they don't fully understand what is going on. Um, and whether we're talking about divorce, whether we're talking about parental alienation, in single parent situations, like the weaponization of children, that's all what the adults want to do.
Mhm.
And if I was to say, how do we fix it? One, we fix it with the next generation. Um, and actually, as time has gone on, I know we poo poo on Gen Z, but um, I actually feel more optimistic about Gen Z than other people do because they have a tool called the internet that other generations did not have. They are far more critical of certain behaviors than I think other generations were at their age. Um, they have a lot more information at their fingertips. Now we have AI. I use Grok all the time. You can ask Grok anything and it'll source all different types of information that you want to understand. They also have, years ago, the only people you really knew were the people who lived around you. And if you're
Mhm.
surrounded by dysfunction, then that's what's normal. But
Yeah.
if you can go online and you see that people lived a vastly different way, and actually that looks way better.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
that's something that's inspirational, or that's something that can make you like question, like, what are we doing wrong here?
Mm.
Like something is broken, right? And it's hard to realize that something's broken if everyone is broken.
That is an
Um,
excellent point. Really, that is a great point.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I use my wife as an example. My wife, she grew up in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Until we got together, and we're in our 40s now, but until we got together, she never really thought about this when it came to like the importance of fathers and things of that nature. She was just kind of in her environment. But when she was growing up as a kid, there was only one family that had a mother and a father in the home, and that was a family from the Caribbean. And she
Mhm.
remembers thinking like, it was weird being over there. It's like, what's this guy doing here? Right? Like, but that's because that was actually abnormal where she lived at.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But you're talking about like in the 80s. Like that was their bubble,
Mhm.
right? And their bubble of dysfunction appeared normal. And so she didn't really value that. Like she didn't really have that concept. Um, I think she hurt from it, just like I hurt from not having my father involved in my life. Um, but it's hard to make that connection. It's hard for anyone to even point that out if everyone you come across is coming from the same dysfunction. No one's gonna
Mhm.
criticize that. It's like, yeah, they're not important.
Mhm.
Right.
I turned out fine. Everyone just says it turned out fine. But I'm looking and I'm like, all y'all are messed up,
Mhm.
and refusing to acknowledge that this is the source of it. The source of it is that you came from dysfunction, that you're
Mhm.
repeating dysfunction with your kids, and your kids are probably going to repeat dysfunction, and the cycle is going to continue.
Mhm.
So even with me pointing these things out within the book, I recognize that we are like 3 or 4 generations deep into this problem,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that it goes beyond racial lines. That you know, very easily we can say that we'll just use like 60%. 60% of black children grow up in a single parent home. Let's just say 60% or even 70%. Depends on which stat you look at. But we're an incredibly small demographic of people. But if you look at, let's say, the white population, I think last time I saw it was like 35%. There are way more white people in America than there are black people.
Mhm.
So that means that there are a lot more white children who are being hurt by this very thing that I'm talking about. They're
Mhm.
just spread out throughout the country,
Mm.
right? They're not confined into urban districts where you can see their dysfunction coming through. They're
Mhm.
spread out amongst the population and they're hurting in various ways. Um, and so, you know, I think by making this, typically it becomes like a racial thing or a community thing, but by making it that way, we're losing sight that this is an American problem. Because
Mhm.
when I talk about this family dysfunction element, I get way more people who do not look like me talking about that's my story, that's my cousin, that's my sister. Like
Mhm.
everyone, every time I talk to somebody about this, every person knows someone who is suffering from either single parenthood for themselves or someone that they know, or divorce from themselves or someone they know, and occasionally foster care. They were children just completely left behind,
Mhm.
Mhm.
um, and had to deal with no advocacy throughout foster care and surviving that and coming out a somewhat functional human being after
Mhm.
being discarded.
Right.
So, we have all of these things that are happening within our society is the underpinning. And then when we look at these big social issues, we go to California and they got homeless people on the streets, and
Mhm.
everybody wants to just throw money at building, these temporary houses, or building more shelters. That'll fix the problem. And it's like, it won't fix the problem because the root of the problem will still remain the same. That's
Yeah.
why it won't get better.
Mhm.
The root of it is not even the drug addiction or having alcohol addiction, whatever addiction that they have. Most of those people are addicted to something.
Mhm.
But like, why are they taking those drugs in the first place? And I say anecdotally, the people I've known that have taken a lot of drugs, or I've seen that have taken a lot of drugs, have started taking drugs when they were teenagers. Sometimes like when they were very young. I've heard
Mhm.
of stories of people drinking when they were like 9.
Mm.
You're like, how does a 9-year-old get alcohol like that? Well, or even think to drink like that. And that just tells you what kind of dysfunction they were coming from, that
Mhm.
they were being raised in. And now we're looking at decades later that this person is disheveled, has no hope whatsoever, and is out in the
Mhm.
street. And we're like, oh, they're just down on their luck. No, society has groomed them to say, F you,
Mhm.
right? And this is where they ended up, and this is where they belong. And as long as they can consume their substance to take their mind off of their physical abuse, their neglect, their sexual abuse, um, like then they'll be satisfied for the time being. And I'll tell you one quick story. I had dinner with an NYPD detective, and we were having this discussion, and he said to me, when we arrest these perps, there's a lot of like waiting around. Like, maybe they have to go to the hospital. We're just waiting around. And I'm like, I'm just standing there. I'm a guy. I'm just standing there with this other guy. And, you're just talking. And they'll
Mhm.
talk to you. And he said, you wouldn't believe how many of these young black men were sexually molested. Like,
Mm.
it was just a common thing.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, yeah. And that's how their frustration shows.
Right.
Um, no one advocated for them, or they don't know how to express what happened to them. They were not being protected. They are actually part of the demographic that is the most vulnerable. Children who are coming from single parent homes, um, because they're more likely to have a non biological adult being inside the home or having
Mhm.
access to the home. Mom's boyfriend, the stepfather, or something to that effect entering the home. And what a lot of people don't realize is that these particular predators are predators. Like, they look
Yeah.
for women in these circumstances. They
Mhm.
will do anything and say anything so they can get closer to the children, because the children were the target, not the mother.
Huh.
And these are like, it's disturbing to even say that, but this is the reality of things. Like, it's
Yeah.
not by happenstance. Oh, she just happened to get with a pedophile.
Right.
It's
Right.
like, no,
Mhm.
he made himself available to you. Oh, you have two children. Let me help you. That
Mhm.
that's what she wanted to hear.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, she's getting her emotions wrapped up into this guy, and once those children are available to him, he takes advantage. And that's what you're seeing over and over. And then we wonder why we have so many people who are acting irrationally in
Mhm.
public, who are
Mhm.
acting out, who are lashing out, who are angry. Like, you would be angry too if you were being violated repeatedly and no one advocated for you.
Sure.
Um, you know, and so I guess the last thing I'll say is how we raise our kids is demonstrating to them in childlike ways what society will be for them. And
Hmm.
if they grow up in an environment where there is no love, then they will project to the world that the world would never love them.
Mhm.
And that's when they have no hope. Because if the people who brought them into this world didn't care about them, why the hell would Adam care about me or
Right.
anybody else care about me?
Mhm.
Um, so we're by not being good parents, we're grooming our kids to be hopeless.
Hmm. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
So powerful. I know that you probably have more questions, but I'm gonna jump in really
Go,
quick.
yeah, please.
So if you don't mind, and maybe you're gonna ultimately go here, obviously you touched on just a few of the topics that are like pretty rampant today, immigration and um overreach of the government, a ton of
Yeah.
government control that is unwarranted. How do we correlate these things? Like, why is it so important to raise the next generation right? And why does that problem that exists now link to all of these other problems that we're seeing on a more national scale?
Well, for one, if you raise your kids right, then they won't be the pawns of politicians to want to do something. Like, the homelessness issue in California becomes an avenue for corruption, right?
Hmm.
Oh no, we just need more tax dollars to take. Oh, just give us more time, take care of these people. You become the people that they feel the need to take care of. And so, granted, these people are in the extremes, but if the problem gets bigger, the extremes get wider as well.
Mhm.
So, what I'm advocating for is that uh, we become more and more diligent when it comes to how we raise our kids. Are we sacrificing for them? Are we doing what is beneficial for us or for our kids? Um, are we just giving up on our partners because it's just easy to move on? Have you devalued the opposite sex? Um, that's, in my opinion, that's a very unfortunate thing, how we devalue men in our society by saying that, um, if I can earn money, then he's just optional.
Mhm.
Why does he need to be here? Um, and obviously, men and fathers provide far more for their children than just, a couple dollars.
Mhm.
So, you know, we have to appreciate each other more. We have to understand and this goes for both sexes. We have to understand the importance of both sexes when it comes to our children,
Mhm.
um, and the need for sacrificing. But I'll bring it like to the very beginning, proper family planning. And
Mhm.
while I was raised in a particular environment where marriage wasn't emphasized, my mother never got married, had
Mhm.
two kids. My father was a married man, but never to my mom. Um, and just being out of that chaotic situation. And then I had my son out of wedlock. Um, and I didn't properly family plan. And so as my son got older and we had started having these discussions, I taught him proper family planning. There's an order to this. You need to make sure that you get married first, then you have children. Like
Mhm.
that is incredibly important. You need to know what you're looking for. Because I think sometimes we stop at that. Oh, just follow the order, get married, then have kids, and you're good to go. It's like, no. How do you know you should marry this person? Right? What are the qualities of a good woman or a good man that you should look for?
Mhm.
Like, you need to understand these things. And especially for the same sex parent is supposed to teach their child what to look for in the opposite sex. The opposite sex parent is supposed to demonstrate what a good male or female looks like as well, right? And
Mhm.
so, in an ideal situation, your parents are modeling male to female interactions. So these things look normal to them. So it's not even just you saying, look for a guy or look for a woman who's like this. They see it. It's in their face. And
Mhm.
so if they were to get with someone who is the polar opposite of their parents, it is likely unattractive and foreign to them. And it would repel them. But if they have no blueprint, and this is a much more common issue, especially that I see from my female friends, if they had no father figure, it's like a cat chasing a laser. Like
Mhm.
like they're just running towards stuff and they don't know what to look for. And as a
Mhm.
guy, I'm like, oh no, that guy's a terrible guy. Like I can see it from a mile away. He's a
Mhm.
player.
Mhm.
And she's like, no, he's wonderful. Oh, he says all the things I want to hear. And it's like, no, but they just can't see it. They never had that demonstration. And then 3 years later, their heart is broken,
Mhm.
right? And going through all this turmoil, and they think that men are just like this. It's like, no, some guys are like that. You need to learn how to discern.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you have all these different elements that children learn consciously and subconsciously by being around their parents. And so that is how you're preparing them for the world. And if they're missing that, then you cannot be shocked when these kids are ending up in gangs, ending up being sexually promiscuous, ending up in scenarios that they shouldn't end up in that are ultimately dangerous, or just terrible relationships, breeding children into the world
Mhm.
that revolve into another failing relationship and just continue the cycle over and over. So you know I wanted to make sure with my son that I stopped the cycle. My son is 19. He is way more uh, he's way farther ahead at the age of 19 than I was at 19. He's a great head on his shoulders. And he has a father that he can always reach out to and ask questions. And I realized, and Dad, you may tell me if you agree with this. Um, Now having an adult child, you become more of a mentor. Could you say that's accurate?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I realized that probably like a year ago. I was like, this feels different. I can't tell him what to do.
Mhm.
But like now he's like calling me, hey dad, what do you think about this? I was like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm like a mentor now. you
One of
know?
the analogies I used for that for some time since Bree's into her 30s now, hard for me to believe. But I
Mm,
said at a point, you become the training wheels. You no longer provide the energy or the direction. That's chosen
mm,
by her. But I'm here as the training wheels to say, no, you don't want to go this way, or you don't want to go that way, or she wants to bounce things. All of our kids, very
yeah.
open and honest relationship, which I'm very, very thankful for. But that's an excellent analogy that we used to use. We're just the training wheels here to try to keep them propped up right, and because the foundation has been laid.
Yeah.
So it brings a lot of pride as you watch your kids, and as you point out, your son with a good head on his shoulders. That's indicative of a stable family environment. And I
Yeah.
one of the comments you made back a few minutes ago, so powerful, and you made many. I think I could probably talk to you all night. Selfishness. I agree 100%. Uh, this generation, mine and younger, have become so enamored with self-satisfaction and pleasing themselves that everything else is left behind. Hey, throw the kid a tablet and let him play with that, or you drop the kid
Uh,
off at the little league field, and now the little league coach becomes the babysitter while you're sitting down at the bar. This is the kind of stuff that has become a reality and I think, I don't know, I've come up with these different scenarios as to how this ended up here, but I think when we as a society uh, got so far removed from just surviving, we no longer have to scratch to survive. We have the luxury of pleasing ourselves, and subsequently, that it becomes a priority, and the other things fall by the wayside, even our
yeah.
children. And it's very, very evident throughout society. And another point I wanted to make, talking about this generational dysfunction, I think one of the places that we've seen this coming before it was nationwide was on the Native American reservations. These conditions are so prevalent. It's just hopelessness. It is a repetitive state of dysfunction, and so few of those people make it out because they are only immersed in that very thing. And you would describe it wonderfully, how that keeps people encased in that situation, and very difficult to break out of. And lastly, as part of that, Adam, if you don't mind, we always are looking for tools to give to our listeners. As somebody who was exposed to those conditions as a young person, do you have any keys that you would say were instrumental in you being able to pull yourself out of that setting?
Um, yeah. I would say that there's many ways that we can go with this. Uh, I think that hope is incredibly important. Um, I struggled with suicidal ideation for many years when I was younger, and I make the point of talking about in the book that um, to become suicidal is to become hopeless, right? And that hope tethers us to life. And so, if you no longer have hope about anything, then what is the point? Um, and so, if you're growing up in a circumstance where you're seeing dysfunction around you, or you're going through something, the last thing you want to do is give up hope. Um, because if you give up hope, all bets are off. You know. Um, so that would be the first thing I would say. Don't lose hope. Um, don't be blindly optimistic, but don't lose hope. Um, the other thing I would say, if you legitimately have some sort of, I don't want to say mental issue, but if you're struggling with something, go see a therapist. Go see a non-woke therapist, not someone who's going to just affirm and, or anything
Mhm.
like that. Go to someone. A good therapist will, one, give you the tools to actually have you not come back at some point. That's what a good therapist will do. So they'll give you strategies. Don't use them as uh, a chatty Cathy girlfriend that you show up to once a week. Um, you have a problem, not just a scenario, but you have a problem, and you need help on how to approach that, or how to understand that problem and dissect that problem. When I got into a my first like real therapist as an adult, I went there for one thing, and I realized that it was connected to all this other stuff. And for like 3 or 4 weeks, I went to the therapist like 3 times a week because it was just all this stuff, and I was just bawling. And I thought I was just there for anxiety and my panic attacks, and I'm uncovering like all this stuff that I just never talked about, all this stuff that I hadn't resolved and I was struggling with. And I thought I put it away, but it was always there. So you know, if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have made it as far as I did. But that was incredibly important. So I'm a big advocate on good therapy. There are bad therapists. Learn how to, distinguish between a good therapist and bad. But I do not poo-poo going to a therapist. I think it's incredibly important, especially if you find a good one who's willing to challenge you, and you have to be willing to be challenged. If you actually want to fix your problem, if you want to go and moan about whatever is going on and not have any resolution, then don't waste your time. Go with friends. Um, so those are I would say those are like the top two things that I would say as far as the strategy goes. Um, don't because a lot of this is mindset. Um, but don't lose hope. And if you need help, go seek help. There's nothing shameful about asking someone for help. Um, we don't always have the answers. Go ask someone. How do you achieve that? Um, and especially for men, find a purpose. Like I think that's incredibly important. Find a purpose. Help somebody else. Like my purpose is to help people. I figured that out years ago. Um, so go help somebody. Go figure out some. Be someone that contributes to society in some form. Um, but yeah, there are many ways that we could
Awesome.
take this.
Yeah. Hey, I wonder if I could just follow that up with this, and I don't want to be stepping on Bree, but at a point during that journey, did your faith, as you mentioned, hope, I automatically think of faith.
Mhm.
Does your faith, your spirituality, did that become a factor at some point through that journey?
So I was baptized last year. Um,
Congratulations. Welcome to the
thank you,
family. Yeah.
thank you,
Yeah.
appreciate it. Um, I detailed this in the book. I actually have my faith journey in the book, but it's for a particular reason because we're talking about children. Because um, I thought that I didn't deserve the love of God as a
Mm.
kid, um, and I thought I was being abandoned by God, just like I was being abandoned by my father. And I don't think that there's any sort of coincidence as to why we call God our heavenly Father. I think it is a it is a role that is incredibly important. Um, and I think that's also why fathers are being attacked in general or being
Mm-hmm.
discredited because we are a, an important pathway to God for our kids. Um, Anecdotally, I watch all different types of testimonies of people coming to Christ, and I want to say every single one of them starts with family separation. It starts with, well, grew up in a single parent home. Oh, my parents got divorced when I was 5. Like, um, it starts with something in their childhood. Every single one of them. It is never, well, I grew up in a 2-parent house and everything was hunky dory, but I was just like, I don't think God is real.
Mm-hmm.
It's some of them, it's like there's this function and grandma takes them to church and they liked it, but there was just like, life was happening to them and they just grew away from God because their childhood was just so chaotic. And it's hard for a kid to have hope and understand that there is a relational God that loves them. Um, and there's always the question of, if God loves me, why would he let me suffer? That's a very common thing, um, especially for kids to understand philosophically. So, you have all these things, and I'm one of those kids where for many years I didn't say that God wasn't real, but I was just like, I don't even know. Um, for years I was lying to people saying I was a Christian, but I didn't know anything about the faith, to be honest with you. Um, and I didn't feel it in my heart. Like I just didn't know. Um, so I was agnostic for many years. Um, I I've had a series of events, some of them supernatural that had happened to me, um, that woke me up to say there's something here. um, which is why within Black Victim, Black Victor, I talk about God, but I'm not being specific. because I'm coming from a place of being agnostic. So for me to even acknowledge that there is a God, and that I feel that there's a God, and I feel that there's God's presence in my life, even with me writing the book, I cannot. If I was to go through all the scenarios where I'm like, things lined up in such an odd way, but it was like oddly perfect that it lined up that way. Even opportunities that I was like, oh, that was supposed to happen, and it didn't happen. If I was to tell you how I got connected to the New York Post, it was purely by accident. It was just like almost everything that has happened, I've been following my instincts, the very thing that I ignored for many years because I was depressed, because I didn't trust myself. And I was ignoring um, that God given instinct, that gift. It's like a guiding light, much like what you were saying, the training wheels, that my instinct is like my training wheels to life,
Mhm.
leading me and helping me into one direction or another. And that's been like my guiding principle. I don't want to do anything that hurts my conscience, that goes against my conscience. And every time I stray away from it, things go bad.
Mhm.
Every time. And so it's rare that I do it.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so that's what I started doing. I just started following my conscience. Like, I like this person. I'm going to talk to this person more. Um, you know what? I'm not going to do this thing. And it turns out the thing I didn't do just completely imploded. Like, I was like, whoa, I guess I looked out there and like, no, that's the common thing.
Mhm.
Um, that even my wife says, everyone you know is nice. I was like, yeah, because I trust my gut and I only mess with nice people. Like, so that's,
Yeah.
but it's that kind of thing where I can't deny God's existence at
Mhm.
all.
Yeah.
On top of
Yeah.
the supernatural events that happened to me, um, you know, the experience of feeling evil and feeling the Holy Spirit before even being saved. Um, I didn't even have the language for it at the time, but I knew what I felt. I knew that was
Mhm.
evil, and I knew that this was good. And I knew the message that I received, and I wasn't looking for a message. So this wasn't optimism.
Mhm.
Right.
I don't know if you have time or if you want me to tell you those.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, definitely. If you have time, we'd love it.
Um, so the evil experience. This was when was it? I started traveling. I think it was back in 2016. I started solo traveling. And that was like the opportunity to really like open me up to like really trust my gut. Like you go to another country, you know nothing,
Mhm.
you don't know anybody, everything is different, so you have to listen to your instincts. And that was the first time I had to trust in my instincts. And I came back home and I realized like how much social anxiety I had prior, that it was like throwing me in the deep end. And I came out and I just felt so much better because I wasn't questioning myself. I wasn't hyper focusing on like the most minute things that don't matter. Um, and so I felt more comfortable in my skin. think that's the best way. But I sort of listened to uh, God's guidance. I think that's the
Mhm.
best way I put it. So it was shortly after coming back, and I woke up. I normally sleep with the TV on at the time. The TV was off. I woke up, and my room looked a little bit darker than normal. It was about 3 something in the morning, probably 3:30 in the morning. My eyes are open, and I'm looking around the room, and I hear in my ear, and I felt it was evil, like it was like an ominous voice saying my name.
Mhm.
And I jumped up and I turned on the light, and I was looking around the room. I was like, what the hell was that? Um, like that scared the hell out of me. And a lot of people were like, oh, that's the sleep paralysis. I was like, no, I wasn't paralyzed.
Right.
Like I was up. I was awake. I was looking around my room, and I
Yeah.
heard something say my name, and
Mhm.
I felt it was evil. Like
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
just wasn't like whatever that was, something demonic.
Mhm.
Um, and at the time, I didn't have the words to put it, and I didn't tell anybody.
Sure.
Um, so I had this girlfriend at the time, and we were new. was a new relationship, and I was at her place, and one day she's in her bathroom, and she said, "Stop it!" And I was like, "Who's she talking to?" I wasn't on the phone, and I didn't. We weren't talking. So what's she talking about? So I was like, "What are you talking about? What's going on?" She says, "All right, I gotta tell you something, but you're gonna think I'm crazy." I'm like, "Just tell me." Like, ever since I was a kid, I hear voices, and they're spirits, and they try to talk to me, and sometimes it's people that I know, and I have to tell them to like stop.
Hmm.
I'm like, "Do you see anything?" She says, "No, that would freak me the hell out." I'm like, "No."
Mhm.
um, but then she looked at me and she said, "Adam, you're not a believer, and because of that, you're easier to attack. Before you go to bed, you need to pray." And I was like, "All right, this isn't a coincidence that she said that to me because I didn't tell her about that night."
Mm.
So that same night, I went back to my place, and I had moved I moved somewhere else. And that new place, I was renting a room in this house, and I just like sometimes at night I just felt off. Like there was something about it. I couldn't put my finger on it. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do that. I prayed before I went to bed. The next morning, I felt great, and I did that for like 2 weeks straight. Just prayed before I went to bed. It was so much better. I
Hmm.
was like, huh, there's something there. Um, and So some months later, this was like all in line. Some months later, without getting like too much into details,
Mhm.
it's a lot. My my grand aunt, who is like my grandmother, my actual grandmother died when I was very young, but she was like my grandmother to me. Um, she was coming out of hospice. They were like, she has days, So
Mhm.
I drove up to Massachusetts to see her. She was out all day. She woke up at night and she was just screaming in pain. And after that, I was like, I can't, I can't do this. So I drove back home. That next morning, they told me that she died.
Mhm.
Um, so that was, just like you lose anybody that's important to you. You're mourning, you're going through all this, you ask yourself questions. My family asked me to be a pallbearer. I agreed. Um, it was like a week or so later, a week and a half later, I went up to Massachusetts for the funeral. My cousin, he's a pastor. He's We're in the church. He's doing his whole sermon and everything. And I'm trying to hold it together. I'm trying not to cry in front of my family. Um, I don't like crying in front of people. So then we leave the church. I'm driving my car to the gravesite, and get out of the car. He says a few words. I'm thinking to myself, here we go. This is gonna be. I'm gonna lose it now.
Mhm.
um, so I walk up to the casket, and I'm like, I know in my head I'm about to start bawling. And I put my hand on the casket, and immediately all my grief went away, disappeared. And I received a message that said she's fine.
Hmm. Awesome.
From that moment, I didn't cry the rest of the time.
Hmm.
All that, whatever was building up, gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And um, which was like, it's so emotional for me to talk about too. It was a great gift to receive because I knew that I wanted to just drive back home and mourn by myself. I
Mhm.
was going to make up some excuse to leave my family and just go home by myself. But I stayed, and I had the best time with my family.
Hmm.
And that's what she would have wanted. Um,
Yeah.
so after that, I was like, and mind you, these things happen. I didn't tell anybody.
Mhm.
Like, so these things, especially after that, I was like, something is here.
Yeah.
Um, this isn't, I don't know what that was. That wasn't me wanting to wish for anything like that. And now I have the language to call these things
Mhm.
demonic and the Holy Spirit, and
Mhm.
it feels right and it feels accurate. Um, and what I conclude is that was a time for the battle of my soul,
Mhm.
Mm.
because I started listening to God in my everyday life, that that anxiety that, some people call the spirit of anxiety, that all that, the spirit of depression, all that stuff that was lingering over me was going away.
Mm.
Like I wasn't feeling that way anymore. I was feeling like I can actually accomplish stuff.
Mhm.
I had started traveling. I left my job and made more money, and my career was taking off. Like all of these things were happening because I started like listening to myself and started trusting myself.
Mm.
Um, and that's when the enemy attacked. Um, but at the right time, that's when God showed His hand and told me He was real. So
Mm.
that was like the beginning part of me coming out of being agnostic to saying there is a
Mhm.
God,
Mhm.
and it was just more of refining um, as to who God is. So even with me writing this book, I tell people all the time, this wasn't just me writing this book because I would send stuff to Michelle. She's like, Adam, you wrote this? And it would just be like words would come to me, and
Mhm.
it started flowing, and it felt right, and I would know like, no, I need to go back and change this. Like it was just instinctual. It
Mhm.
felt right, and it felt like it wasn't just me doing it.
Mm.
Um, and even just like going through the entire process of just no expectations, all faith, and just seeing where it leads me. And it kept leading me to Christian after Christian after Christian. People who were speaking
Mm.
to my heart. Um, and even with me getting baptized was with Monica Matthews, who's now a business partner of mine. Um, we had met and we started sort of like working together in the beginning process. And she lives in Atlanta. My family's in Atlanta now. And I've been talking about wanting to get baptized for like a year, but I'm not part of a church. And I didn't know, but I wanted to do it with my family, but everybody is farther away from me. And I was like, she's in Atlanta. She's an ordained minister. I was like, let me ask her. She's like, would you do this for me? She's like, oh yeah, of course.
Mhm.
So she got a chaplain friend as well. He's a theologian, and he brought a vial of water from the Jordan River,
Mm.
and we went to Stone Mountain Park, and I was baptized sloppily because because I'm not one for being in lakes, but
Mhm.
but we're they baptized me in the lake in Stone Mountain, um, and all of that was just by once again God placing certain people in my life, and
Mhm.
my family was there, my mom, my sister, my nephew, my uncle, my aunt-in-law. My wife came down. My only person who wasn't able to come was my son.
Mhm.
But like I had like all of my family here. I got to make the promise to God in front of my family.
Mhm.
In a similar way, I made a promise to God, um, you know, while getting married to my wife, in front of my family. So like all these things, they mean a lot to me. They're very
Mhm.
symbolic. Um, so once again, like all this stuff, just like it seems like accident, but it's just things I wasn't looking for because I didn't have any expectations.
Mhm.
And I think God is lining people up in my life and teaching me to be patient. Um, Sometimes you want things to happen a particular way. I tend not to rush anything. It's like it's not happening right now. Just have faith and just wait. And when it's the right time, it'll come through.
Yeah.
Such a wonderful testimony. I'm glad we got to that part. I really appreciated hearing that. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, great story. Hopefully some of our listeners will find some value, maybe for loved ones or anybody else that's struggling with the kind of conditions that you went through. This
Yeah.
can be an inspiration. So very powerful. We appreciate it.
No, my
Yeah.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on. We try to stick to an hour, based on what your availability is, but we've gone quite a bit over here tonight, and I really appreciated your extra time to spend with us because we really enjoyed everything you shared. So, like you said earlier, I'm sure we could talk for hours, but maybe we can have you back. Before we close, like I said, he typically closes with the Bible verse, but before we get to that, Let everybody know, where they can find you. Obviously, we didn't even touch on the new book really tonight. So where to find that, any new upcoming projects you might be working on, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I am co-founder of Thirst Entertainment. It's going to be a new streaming platform, as well as articles, trying to put out positive content that is beneficial to the soul, um, that it helps to improve our relationships. So that project is coming very soon. The new book, Children We Left Behind, is out. It's everywhere. The audiobook is out. Still working on Audible. Audible's been a pain in the ass. Um, but it is on every other audiobook platform. Um, and my Substack, people can check out the Substack, adambcoleman.substack.com.
Awesome. We'll definitely share all of that in the show notes. Again, we really can't thank you enough. Everything's been so insightful and really a powerful story.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so if you don't mind sticking around a few more minutes for him to share the Bible verse for the evening, and then we'll sign out.
Okay, I hope there's some relevance to the Bible verse selected tonight. I try to hook it to the theme, and this was very powerful. I want to thank you myself again for joining us. And the Bible verse tonight comes from 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever.
Yeah.
So good fit.
Yeah. So with that, Adam, again, from both of us, sincerely appreciate all your time tonight. I hope we can have you back. We'll talk. We'll get a little bit further down the line on some of your new projects, including your new book.
Yeah. Anytime.
Right. Well, thanks again, Adam. Enjoy your evening, and we hope to talk to you again.
Yep. I'll talk to you soon.
Good night. Thank you.
All right, everybody. So that was Adam B. Coleman. You guys know the drill. We will be back next Thursday, 6 p.m. Pops, it was great to share this one with you live.
It sure was. Always good to be in the same studio.
Yep. We may even have another couple of those coming up through the next several months. So
looking forward to it.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
Until next time, stay vigilant.
Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate the support and truly love getting to share this message with anyone who wants or needs it. The best way for you to support the show is to subscribe, add a rating, and share with everyone you know. You can find us on Instagram, X, and at thefourthbox.com. We'll see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Stay vigilant.